recorded or rebroadcast.
Even Victoria now, or Osseo, obviously, in some of these different areas, Hopkins, and Wayzata, for instance, Brewworks and others that they joined. We had a little event, and we wanted to hear their stories, and it was just really interesting because of the benefits. They're going to be basically giving more health benefits or hiring more employees. Some are just giving more raises, to their employees. There was one story that I think that was really interesting, and that was a distillery in Brooklyn Park. Husband and wife working well over, I think, he was claiming, close to 100 hours a week for over a year, and they're going to hire their very first employee. Which is pretty neat. And I just got word that Loram, which is a company out in Medina, is now going to make an announcement this next week, I think, of some special bonuses and investments, too. So good news all around there. Bottom line is it's tax reform that was long overdue. We shouldn't wait 31 years and a generation to do it, but now that when you do it once in a generation, build it for growth. So for the first time, we're actually seeing wages rise again, which is a good sign. And 90% of all workers, we also know now, if you haven't checked your check, check your check, because all the IRS withholding tables changed, and so you should have more money in every single paycheck that you're bringing home. 90% actually of all Americans now have more money in their pocket because the IRS automatically changes the withholding tables to reflect the new tax reduction in rates, and so that's why there's been such a boost in spur of economic growth, which is kind of exciting. And I would love to continue to hear any other personal stories that you may have or that we should be sharing or talking about, or issues of concern or changes that might need to be made or updates that need to be made, too, as a part of reform, because we're not going to wait 31 more years to address, tax reform. We've got to make sure we're modernizing on a consistent basis going forward. Next issue, just to talk about real quick, and we'll run through a few more, obviously, before we get on to taking your questions. But that's just a case of another tragedy, a gun mass shooting that took place down in Parkland, Florida. Unfortunately, I'll just tell you, as a husband of a school teacher and a parent, it is absolutely imperative that schools are safe and they have an environment where students are able to learn. And we had the issue just out in Orono, for instance, where we really did have incredible work done by our law enforcement community, like the Orono Police, Hennepin County Sheriff, Minneapolis Office of the FBI. Very different than what happened in Florida, obviously, and we can be thankful for that. One thing I will say is that there are obviously gaps in the system. Republicans and Democrats should agree that those gaps in our current system need to be fixed to address gun violence. We had the issue, for instance, in Florida, where a lot of tips and alerts and red flags were raised about the individual that was apprehended that were not acted upon. The FBI admits that protocols weren't followed. That should never have obviously happened. But aside from that, there are still some very common sense actions that I believe should be taken in response to any one of these tragedies that have happened. And these are really straightforward, again, common sense opportunities to start making a difference. One would be banning these bump stocks. These are devices that are intended to convert semi-automatic firearms into automatic weapons, which are illegal. Automatic weapons are illegal. And so, from my perspective, if you get a device that converts it to an automatic weapon, that should be illegal as well. And there's bipartisan support for that. I also think we should lift the ban on federal research on gun violence, because if we get more facts as policymakers, we can just start making smarter decisions on where resources should go, what should be targeted. And part of that, I think, is mandating that the federal and state authorities be required to report all relevant criminal records to the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, this NIC system that is really the key to understanding, when someone comes in and asks for maybe a purchase of a weapon, they have to go through this system, and the system is only as good as the data that is put in. And so, domestic violence records, for instance, that were not included, or a dishonorable discharge that was not included for the gentleman in the Air Force who committed the act of violence this fall in Texas, for instance. I think those records should be included. I also think we should consider these gun violence restraining orders, and that would allow law enforcement to go and remove an individual's access to firearms through a court when there's evidence that they're a danger to themselves, they're a danger to others. And there's other things we can do, obviously, to increase federal assistance for school security and things like that. But there's opportunity, bottom line, to fill in the gaps, and that's what I think really needs to be done. Other good news, and again, dial *3 on your telephone if you'd like to ask a question, and we'll jump into just a sec. But real quick, good news also on the front.
The Access Live event operator has been notified that you wish to ask a question.
Continuing resolutions and, potential government shutdowns. And, the good news is we won't have that any longer because there's a 2-year budget agreement that was done. Republicans, everyone agreed. Good news is all the priority funding essentially went into National Institutes of Health, opioid addiction, veterans, and these were areas of bipartisan agreement. And, look, everyone doesn't like every compromise, but compromise isn't a dirty word. That's what the system is. That's what we should move forward on in order to get some things done. It also included and made sure that we not only have the medical device tax repealed for another 2 years, but we also have 10 years of reauthorization of the Children's Health Insurance Program. That's very important to a state like Minnesota, for instance, that has 125,000 or so children and pregnant mothers that rely on a very important program for access to health care to supplement our state's interests and needs. And then I should mention, too, real quick, is that there's an Alzheimer's initiative, knowing that now more than 5 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's, that number is going to be going up with all these baby boomers, and it's expected to triple by year 2050. So, we're spending a lot of money, about $259.
Hello, this is the operator. Can I have your name?
My name is Tracy.
Okay, and what is your question for the Congressman?
Well, I'm wondering when he is going to fill in the gaps for individuals and small groups in the healthcare market that are pre-retirees, because right now we're going to be spending like $2,000, $2,400 more for our insurance next year, and it wipes out the tax savings we're going to get.
Just one moment. Alrighty, thank you for your question. I'll put you back into the call.
Thank you.
That essentially insulates them. And we passed a bill today with huge bipartisan support. It's going to become law. And it removes that liability and gives some more tools to our local law enforcement officers. So it's exciting to see that we're making a difference along that front, because it is happening in Minnesota. It's happening around the country. And we can literally save lives and make a difference for a lot of these young victims by cracking down on the demand side of these websites. And then finally, I'll mention a week ago I helped recognize 10 different individuals and organizations in our community. I gave them what's called the Star of the North Award, and this included teenagers who raised literally hundreds of thousands of dollars for cancer research. Others sent care packages to troops overseas. Others took in foster animals for care while they're battling cancer themselves. Others were helping at local food shelves, for those who are struggling, and including elementary students. I mean, it was pretty inspiring to know that not only this Minnesota Nice perspective is happening, but people care about our community, and they're actually moving forward to make a difference. So anyway, those are just some thoughts, ideas of what's been happening, some of the initiatives I'm working on. We're going to open up the phone lines. Dial *3 for your question, and if you have a question, and thanks for hanging on with us tonight, and we'll ask you a question for a poll question just a little while too. So I think first we have Kevin on the line from Plymouth. Kevin, thanks for waiting.
Yeah, hey, thanks. It wasn't my question, but I don't know if you have any additional detail. Was that website, is that directed at just child sex trafficking, or is that directed at sex trafficking in general? But my actual question was regarding North Korea and your opinion on that situation, and how likely you think it is that it'll result in military action.
Yeah, okay. Well, first of all, thanks. I'll take both questions. First, on the follow-up on this online sex trafficking issue. The bottom line is we're trying to enhance some of the penalties for websites that facilitate this illegal prostitution or trafficking. As an example, when I was part of I joined a sting operation in our western suburbs with our police departments, and Backpages.com, they put an ad up. advertised a 15-year-old girl, right, for sex. It took less than an hour, and they had 100 hits just on the 494 corridor in an hour. And so essentially what the bill does is it's going to hold these bad actors accountable by clarifying that the provision of the law does not grant immunity to websites that facilitate sex trafficking. You're still going to have immunity for free speech and things like that, but you're not going to be able to use that claim when you're facilitating sex trafficking. That's the bottom line. It just gives some more tools for local law enforcement to go after those guys. In the North Korea situation, obviously, the recent actions taken by the North Korean government, over the course of the last, obviously for a decade, but mostly over the last year are, very alarming. And it poses a very serious threat, not only to the United States, but the international community right on the South Korean border. I just think we need to be committed to ensuring that North Korea does not continue to develop this ballistic weapons program, which is a violation, by the way, of international law. And we just have to have the international community kind of stick together, stay together, apply that pressure. We do have more sanctions, and we've passed more sanctions in Congress, and they've been implemented. I think they can actually be tighter in terms of what oil and energy resources are flowing from China to North Korea, for instance, and that will put more pressure on. They've kind of toned it down during the Olympics, obviously. We should always be working diplomatically to do whatever we can, just knowing that there's tension on the Korean Peninsula, and we got, a lot of Americans who are at risk there, as well as soldiers, obviously, that are in the area. And so those are just some thoughts in there. It's hard to sort of predict about how it could escalate or what could happen. I don't think it helps for the United States posture to ramp up rhetoric. The president's done that. But I do think we have to be sort of, obviously prepared and serious about it, because whether it was President Bush, President Obama, or others, it's been over a decade or so where we've had issues that have lingered and have not gone away. And we just have to be ready to deal with it, because obviously I think they just want to be able to provide additional threats. Okay, I think we've got Gene on the line from in-perosn. Gene, thanks for waiting.
Hi, am I on?
Hey, yeah, thanks for waiting. Sorry about that.
Yeah, in light of what happened in Parkland, I'm wondering what your stance is on, you mentioned on stocks, but also the assault weapons ban, if you would support reinstating the ban, and on thorough background checks.
Yeah, okay, I'm just making a couple notes. Thanks for asking. So a couple of things right off the bat. As I mentioned earlier, I think the best thing we can do, because some of these issues have been really divisive, have gotten bogged down, and we've had no action. And there are things we should agree with. There's gaps. We should fill those gaps right away. I think, again, the best thing you can do right away, lift the federal research on gun violence. If the ban is lifted and the research comes back and says, there's issues, whether it's assault weapons, et cetera. Now, assault rifles are illegal. They are not illegal, which is why I think banning bump stocks and making them illegal is just common sense. I said that right away in September. I signed on a bill to do that. It hasn't moved forward. I know the NRA doesn't like that. But you know what? That is something that it's common sense from my perspective, because it's transferring a weapon into an illegal weapon, essentially. There was an assault weapon ban that was in place for a period of time, but there was no reduction in crime. And so part of the categorization is, how do you label something as, quote, an assault weapon? Because there are hunting rifles that are semi-automatic that have the same ability or the same characteristics of, say, an AR-15 or something that's used. Now, I'm open to raising the age for those types of issues, and some states are doing that or looking at that. I also do think that looking at these gun violence restraining orders should absolutely be done. Now, we have 5 states that have done that, but that does allow an ability for law enforcement or family members to go to law enforcement when they say something is not right with my friend or family member or someone I know because of maybe mental health, whatever it may be, and it has an avenue then, and you get due process through this, but if they're going to be a danger to themselves or others through a posting on social media, whatever it might be, you've got an ability to instantly act and react and close a gap. That's something I think that we should absolutely be done. Okay, I think we've got Kimberly on the line from Wayzata. Thanks for waiting.
Hello?
Hi, Kimberly.
Hello. My family is Vietnamese and German, fifth generation German, first generation Vietnamese. And I am wondering why you don't support the DREAM Act.
The DREAM Act. Well, I'm actually a couple of things. For those of you that don't know, there's some different categories in immigration. Kim was asking about something called the DREAM Act. What I support is first fixing the DACA issue, because and DACA are for those folks essentially that are young people that came to the United States through no fault of their own, here at a very young age. Their parents may have came here illegally, but they're here when they're younger than 16 by January 1st of 2012, for instance. And I think that those people deserve, for all practical purposes, they're America's children. And they should be allowed to be here. They should have a legal pathway to be here. They should be on that pathway. And know that they're going to be safe and secure and not under threat of leaving. Now, the Supreme Court just had a ruling yesterday, or the courts had a ruling yesterday, saying that there won't be a March 5th deadline on DACA recipients having to renew, that will be extended. I think that was the right decision. Now, I think also that Congress should take action soon to clarify and make progress on DACA, to give certainty, again, to DACA recipients, for instance. And then in terms of Dreamers, I mean, that's like another step farther. But again, every time you add another step, that's a reason for someone else to vote no. And that's what has prevented progress in immigration reform. And as someone who is, again, you're seeing the great results of tax reform and growth in the economy, we need workers to fill these jobs. There's like 6.5 million jobs right now that aren't being filled. We need to fill these jobs. And so we're going to need the immigration community. We're going to need other people that have left the workforce. There's about 7 million young adults that have left the workforce as well. And so we're going to have to make sure that they're back in the workforce also. But good question. And it's one of those other issues, not too much different than some of the gun violence issues, for instance, that immigration has prevented progress from happening. Okay, good question, though. Okay, we got some other questions, though. I think we have Tom on the line from Excelsior. Tom?
Yeah, my question is, why are we being taxed on full Social Security in the state of Minnesota?
In the state of Minnesota.
You're one of 7 states out of 52 states.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, it's not an issue that I can help with, because your question is regarding specifically the state of Minnesota, and I think the state is actually, the state legislature and the governor have debated this issue, whether they should tax Social Security benefits or seniors, for instance, if they should have a certain tax break on those benefits. I would really encourage you to reach out to your state legislators about that issue, state House members, state Senate members. But in many, many states, and I didn't know the number until you just mentioned it, but I know a lot of states do provide that benefit, or they don't tax Social Security. Part of it is wanting to keep seniors and Social Security recipients in Minnesota, after they retire, and not move, maybe only because of the weather, but they may want to stay, obviously, because they've grown in the community and they have kids and grandkids and, philanthropy, et cetera. And I'd rather see them be more efficient, use those dollars locally, which makes sense. And I've had some debate, I think, in Minnesota legislature about it, and I thought it was going to be a part of a tax bill, actually, they talked about a year ago, but I don't think it ever got passed. So, okay, we're going to keep rolling. I think we've got Renee on the line from Chanhassen. Renee, thanks for waiting.
Yes, my question is for the health insurance for your kids, are we still going to be able to insure our kids until they're 26?
Until age 26?
Yeah, with our health care insurance.
That is correct. Yeah, that all stays intact under the law. And, it's actually one of those provisions, even in the context of the controversies around the new health care law, there was strong bipartisan support to actually have that provision. It makes sense. A lot of young kids get out of college, they may have trouble getting a job, they may have health insurance that's too expensive, and so why not allow them to be on their parents' health care policy till age 26? That is still the law. I do not foresee that changing at all. Now, Minnesota was even ahead of the curve when it did it on its own, but that is the federal law. That's not going to change. That's actually going to stay the same. Good question, though. Okay, we have Joanne on the line from Chanhassen also. Thanks for waiting.
Hi. I was wondering how you can reason voting with Trump on 98.5% of the issues since he's been elected. You said you would be a moderate Republican, but I don't see that as being a moderate kind of vote. Can you talk about that for a moment?
Yeah. Well, a good question, actually. This is kind of one of those things where, people can kind of, use numbers or statistics in a funny way. And look, for me, it doesn't matter who the president is. But if it would be irresponsible to not raise the debt ceiling, for instance, it would be irresponsible not to provide aid to communities like the hurricane funding that went to Texas or the wildfires in California. So, yeah, the president supported all those bills that I supported. He signed them into law. So, of course, I'm going to have a higher score because of those provisions. I'm not going to vote against a budget agreement because it was a compromise that he signed into law and keep the government open, right? And so I'm not an advocate of shutting the government down over one single issue because it didn't go my way, for instance. And so because of that, I may have a higher percentage of being with the president when he signs something into law, because the president doesn't vote, but he will sign things into law, for instance. The other thing is it's really important also to keep in mind that when the president also takes action, I have concerns about where he might be going on trade now, for instance, and I actually had a meeting today with the president, and I expressed strong concerns about the direction that the administration is heading on NAFTA and potential higher costs, not only for our consumers, but for potentially slowing down some of the economic growth we've had, because we sell so much out of Minnesota now to Canada, to Mexico. Those are our two top trading partners because of NAFTA and the benefits there. And so I said, look, whether you're a big company like General Mills, where 95% of everything they sell in Canada comes from the United States, or you're a small company, we need you, Mr. President, to be fighting to sell American goods and services every step of the way. And so I've been pretty vocal about that and making sure that when there's a difference. So part of it is just being independent and in challenging the president, no matter who it is. President Obama signed, I was one of the members who had most of my bills signed into law by President Obama 2 years ago when very few things were passing or being signed into law. But again, if you want to get stuff done, you're going to have to be bipartisan. You're going to have to work across the aisle. You're going to have to build relationships, which is, obviously very, very important. So good question, and we're going to keep rolling. Obviously, the numbers don't tell the whole story, and I think, Minnesotans know that. I think we should ask you guys a poll question real quick. You can just hit a button on your telephone. It's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. And if you need more information, you can hit a button there too. But here's the question, and you'll hit 1 for yes, 2 for no, 3 for undecided. And undecided is if you just don't have enough information to. But it is a question on gun violence in this sense with background checks. So the question is this: do you believe that we should be mandating that federal and state authorities report criminal records, all relevant criminal records, to the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, which is the NICS system, including domestic violence? Should that also be included or required as part of an effort to prevent gun violence? Should that be mandatory? Should it be required to be a part of the background checks? If you think yes, that domestic violence, that the Air Force dishonorable discharge, that those types of issues from all those different agencies should be included in the National Instant Criminal Background Check System. If that should be true, press 1 for yes, press 2 for no, and then just press 3 for undecided. Because again, sometimes you just don't have enough.
Your response has been registered.
Just can't. It's not simple yes or no all the time. I get it. But those are some of the decisions we're forced to deal with as well. So if you think that all that relative information should be put in the Instant Criminal Background Check System, though, hit 1 for yes, 2 for no, and 3 for unsure. Okay, we've got Peggy on the line from Rogers. Thanks for waiting.
Yes, I've been real happy with your support for President Trump in all his ways. Yeah. He's been doing things. One of the things I'm really confused about with these school shootings is why don't they use metal detectors if they're having an officer there guarding the doors anyways? It would solve all the school shootings that we've had.
Well, it's a really good question. The truth is we have a bill now that is getting a little more attention. I've signed on as a co-author. The congressman who represents the district in Florida where the tragedy took place is also really advocating for this bill. It's called the Stop School Violence Act, and it essentially does increase federal assistance for school security. And part of it is making sure it's a resource issue, right? So schools right now and school districts can use money as they give as they see fit. They could put in metal detectors if they want. I'm not sure that all schools need them. That's not for me to say, but if a school district
that's the problem. Nobody's sure, but this would definitely stop the issue. And otherwise, we run into the same thing all over again. It's like, oh no, another school shooting. Now we're going to do it. Shouldn't have been in that neighborhood. I mean, these kids are precious, and I think that's something that would stop anything from coming into schools. I mean, you need to go through it to go to airplane. You need it. You go to the county. You go downtown to Hennepin County. You go upstairs in the government center. You need it there. Why not have it at the schools? None of this would have happened. And one police officer guarding that, and if some kid comes in with a gun, he'll be caught. Because all this gun control doesn't take the guns out of the criminals' hands. You know, it just doesn't do it. I mean, if you're on some list, just go buy a gun for somebody else or whatever. Get it from a parent, or if he's mentally unstable. So it doesn't really, as far as I'm concerned, really solve an issue. I mean, if you got a kid at school, at home, maybe he's 25 and he's living at home and he can't buy a gun and his parents have a gun. Well, there you go. He has the opportunity to use that. So I really think in the schools we need to do something like metal detectors.
Okay, good. Well, Peggy, I appreciate that. And, it's actually interesting that you raised that because, I think the president or some others have advocated, arming teachers, for instance. And I'm surprised, actually, that more haven't been talking about maybe doing things, like metal detectors. It is a resource issue. I bet if a couple school districts did it or made announcements, you'd see more attention on it. You'd probably see more school districts doing it and moving forward along those lines, I suppose. So, good question, though. All right, we're going to keep rolling as quick as we can. I think we have Karen on the line. It looks like it wasn't Karen. It was Larry on the line from Plymouth.
Hello?
Hey, Larry, you still there?
Oh, yeah, thank you. Okay, so the things you've said so far in gun violence prevention is a good start, but, as I recall, you had mentioned after the Las Vegas shooting that you were a co-author of the bump stock banning. And why hasn't that passed? I mean, that should be such a no-brainer. Are you stepping up to help sway your colleagues in the House to move this along? I mean, that's a relatively minor thing because, in the overall scheme of things. But, I firmly believe, let me just...
I agree.
Last week at the Minnesota State Capitol, I don't know if you saw in the Star Tribune, that there were well over 1,000 people in the rotunda for this rally on gun violence prevention. So what I'm suggesting is that there are a lot of people in your district as well as all over the country, and the students from Parkland High School have been very articulate in expressing the need for some very common sense gun violence prevention measures. Now you mentioned some of these, and I commend you for that, but we need to see some action. Now personally, the AR-15 that's been used in several of these, it's not maybe officially classified as an assault weapon because it's not fully automatic, but the student at Parkland, or the kid at Parkland, fired how many rounds there, and most hunters and gun owners and even who are even NRA members don't see a need for the AR-15. Why should it be so difficult to ban that weapon and create some creative buyback program or just something? I mean, the lack of action is just disgusting. Your wife is in the schools, right? I mean, she works for a school. Right. Would you want armed guards in her school and teachers with guns and all that? Anyway, there's a lot of interest in Congressional District 3 for moving the gun violence prevention thing much further than it currently is. The second thing I just wanted to bring up is regarding the SNAP or food stamp benefits. Okay. As you're well aware, President Trump's 2018-19 budget proposed to cut the SNAP benefits by more than $193 billion over the next 10 years. That's like a 25% cut. The people that qualify and use SNAP benefits are among the most vulnerable in the country. The tax cuts, that's good to some extent, but it's really the people who are most benefit are the 1%ers, the 5%, the richest people, and it's going to take a long time for those benefits to trickle down to the people that are on SNAP benefits. So I'd like to get your comments on.
Well, a couple of things, Larry. And I would first of all, it's not just District 3, in our area that's looking for some common sense solutions on gun, violence issues. I don't know what your perspective is, but if you have 1,000 people rallying at the state capitol, do you think they're making progress on banning bump stocks at a state level? I would hope your voice would be helpful in moving that forward. I certainly, after I signed on, I've gotten a couple more of my colleagues to sign on to that bill, but no, we have not been able to get a vote on it, even though we have bipartisan support. I'm glad the president came around now and actually is supporting that provision. He was not supporting it 3 months earlier, but he's got a little bit more of a bully pulpit in actually advocating for that now, which can actually be very, very helpful. And that is a common sense thing. Why can't we do that? Why can't we fix some things where there's bipartisan support? Now there are some Democrats who say, well, that's just not enough and we have to have more. Well, why can't we do some things that actually make a difference and close some gaps? That's my position. That's my view. And that's what the average person, I think, would agree to as well. And in terms of SNAP, obviously when the president proposes a budget, we disposed of a lot of those budget recommendations that were made last year. That'll happen again. It was, I don't think President Obama's budget had one vote in support, even from his own party. And so they just do that usually just to fill in holes. But I do think that SNAP has big benefits. And I, with Betty McCollum from Minnesota, did some other unique programs for the homebound senior population within SNAP to making sure that their benefits would actually be able to be used for homebound seniors. So we did some modifications for SNAP because it does serve a very low population. But I'll tell you one area where you are misguided, and that's on tax reform. That is not aimed at wealthy individuals, and the numbers are bearing that out. The average tax reduction for a family of four is well over $2,000 instead of $2,059. That's real money in people's pockets. And every 2 weeks or every pay period, people are getting more money. It might be $8 a week. It might be $10 a week. But you know what? Half the country has been living paycheck to paycheck. And for the first time in the history of the country, we had a recovery, an economic recovery, where wages fell. That's never happened before in the history of our country. And so we got to get wages increasing again so that seniors and baby boomers that rely on important government programs are going to be able to benefit from a growing competitive economy, so that young people graduating from college are going to be able to find jobs that compete for another job where wages go up, be able to pay down student loans, and not have to live at home. We have record numbers of people in the last 8 years that have been living at home, at family, because they can't afford to live on their own. And so we're making progress in all those areas now, thankfully, for the first time in well over a decade. But you're right. Why can't we agree to some of these more common sense provisions? That's the direction we should be going. Dennis on the line from Rogers. Thanks for waiting.
Hello.
Hi, Dennis.
Hi. I just wanted to get your take on something, sir.
Okay.
I have been in the Air Force. In fact, I enlisted in 61, and one of their inducements was I would have medical care for the rest of my life, as well as my immediate family. Well, I didn't realize it, but after I retired, that a lot of it was gutted, and the only reason I was able to get anything was because I was below the poverty line. But now I'm forced to pay a copay for my medical care, or prescriptions, which I was told would be covered. Well, now it's not. You know, at least they could tell you this when you retire or send a letter out, and whether it's surprising you that this was happening.
Yeah.
It really hurt. I mean,
yeah, well, that's
what they have done is they, from time to time, I got to where I couldn't keep up. I quit, and they come in, and they were taking anything that was over 120 days, they would snap it right out of my Social Security. Well, obviously, that cut my food budget for that month, and that doesn't help either.
Well, Dennis, what I should do, first of all, number one, thank you for your service. That's important. I am a big believer that, you know, our country should be taking care of veterans before, during, and after deployment. And clearly you're in the after deployment category. And I think we should see if there's anything we can do with some of our staff, district staff, who happen to be caseworkers who can often work with, might be the VA, it might be other agencies, cutting through red tape to making sure that if there's a copay you don't think you should be paying, we're happy to help do that. So we've got your info, we've got your phone number, and I will have someone from my office give you a shout tomorrow, or you can feel free to call my Eden Prairie office as well, and then we can just circle around and make sure that that we're kind of closing the gap there and being helpful if we can. Good question. Okay, we've got Kate on the line from Chaska. Thanks for waiting.
Hi, Eric. Thanks for inviting me tonight.
Yeah.
Midterms are coming up, and the FCC has just negated net neutrality. And I read in the Washington Post this morning, Congress is trying to repeal that. Now, what is your stance on that?
Oh, you said Congress is trying to repeal net neutrality?
Well, they're trying to get it to where it will overturn Ajit Paj's...
Yeah. Okay. So what Kate's talking about is that, and this gets a little confusing for people, but I mean, fundamental. This is about sort of access to the internet, free and open internet. I mean, my perspective is this. Now we'll talk about net neutrality in a second, but I believe everyone should have access to a free and open internet, and Minnesotans should be able to access any content they want on whatever device they choose. I think we should preserve an open internet. I mean, we think of all the economic growth we had in the mid-'90s all the way until 2014, and then there were some new rules put in place with Obama, and then those rules got changed in 2014 or 16. They just got changed recently by Ajit Pai that you had just mentioned. So bottom line is now you've got an agency that is kind of going back and forth on these different rules. My preference would be we should pass legislation that prevents blocking of content, that prevents censorship, that prevents unfair, discriminatory treatment of internet traffic. And having legislation to do that would bring a lot of certainty to the internet service community, right, to invest more money, et cetera. That's important. And that's important also that it's fair across the board. So it's not only just the providers like, you know, a Comcast or an AT&T, but also a Facebook and a Google, because those companies also are trying to leverage their position, you know, with all the information they have on you, because, you know, that's where all your smartphones, our smartphones use. You know, they track you and they know all your information. But they all should be held to the same standards as well. And so there should be no discrimination, no throttling, no blocking, no discriminatory treatment, and we should put that in the law. And so just go back and forth. You know, that's the best way to have sort of this neutrality is sort of my view. Okay, I think we've got Joan on the line from Wayzata.
Yes, hi, Congressman Paulsen. Thank you for taking my call, and thank you for serving our district. You mentioned earlier in the discussion tonight about the debt ceiling. For so many of us Republicans, we were encouraged in the fall of 2016 when we had so many Republicans elected, and we were hoping that there would be some serious work done on reducing government spending, but I don't really see that happening. It just seems like the Republicans are in the same mindset as the Democrats, and they just keep spending. So I just would appreciate hearing what your specific plans are.
Yeah, well, it's a really good point. The issue of spending does not get a lot of attention in Washington by either party, and both parties are responsible for it, right? It's not just Democrats or Republicans, too. And, the one piece of good news is that domestic discretionary spending has essentially gone down 4 years in a row. And that's primarily because, Republican Congress working with the Democrat president for the last 4 years earlier really put pressure to actually lower domestic discretionary spending. Now, the challenge is that did not do anything to alleviate the growing national debt, for instance, because that's been driven by health care, the Affordable Care Act, other mandatory programs that have sort of offline. That's off of discretionary spending. That's where the real dollars are. Now, the president has not wanted to engage in any conversation with changes of those programs. It's going to have to be bipartisan when that's done, much like Ronald Reagan and a Democratic Congress came together to do some things for long-term savings. Now, we had some of that with President Obama, where we did some things with Medicare, for instance, that were bipartisan, that helped preserve the program for a little bit longer, or Social Security disability, for instance, that helped give relief to Social Security. That was done bipartisanly, but more is going to have to be done along those lines, to be honest. I think in the next week or two, the House will once again bring up a vote on a balanced budget amendment, and I support that. I think that's a conversation we should be having. I think 48 or 49 states have to have a balanced budget. And so we're not going to get to a balanced budget overnight, but the budgets that we have passed out of the House have all been balanced within a 10-year period. And once you balance it within 10 years, obviously then you grow your way out of it and you're moving in the right trajectory. We've not had luck with the Senate along those fronts. The Senate has not been interested in doing that, and that's part of the challenge. And we just need more people that are interested in talking about deficits and debt and focusing attention on it, to be honest. And that's on both sides, or it's going to continue to be an issue and a problem down the road. And I personally believe that now that we're sort of out of this mode of 2% growth, right? Status quo was always 2%. We can never do any better than that. Wages are going to be flat. People aren't going to be getting as much. Revenues aren't going to increase. And that's changing now because the economy is really starting to boom again. So more revenues are going to be coming in. Now the key is focus on the other side of the ledger. Focus on the spending side, because when those revenues go up, guess what? We should use that to start paying down the debt. That's what I think we should be doing, for instance. Okay, good question, though. All right, we got Molly on the line from Maple Grove. Thanks for waiting, Molly.
Hi there. Thanks for taking the call.
Yeah.
I'm worried about Russian meddling in the 2018 election. So today, Mike Rogers of the NSA said that he's had no direction from the White House to make any effort to stop it. And then Chris Wray, the FBI director, he had said the same thing last week. He has had no direction from the White House. And Donald Trump doesn't believe it's real, even though there have been indictments. So it's up to Congress to act to protect the integrity of the election. So I'm wondering what can be done, and what do you intend to do to ensure that the Russians don't meddle again as they did in 2016?
Yeah, well, first of all, the Russians are going to meddle. They meddled in 2016. They're going to meddle again. They've done it before 2016. They've meddled in all the European elections. The Russians are not our friends. I personally believe that maintaining public trust and integrity in our elections, as well as all of our institutions like the FBI you mentioned, it's critical. It's so important. And so, for nearly 10 months, we've had the FBI investigating, Russian interference in the election in 2016, getting a better understanding of what happened. We got separate, committee hearing and investigations going on. I remember back when you had the extraordinary decision when the president decided he was going to fire the FBI director, James Comey, last year. I thought, you know what? When you have your independent law enforcement agency move to the side with a firing, you need to have an independent investigation, independent counsel appointed. I was one of the first that came out and said that. Robert Mueller was appointed. We need to see that appointment stay, his investigation move forward. Whatever happens there. But in terms of actually what do we do to make sure there's no more interference, we have to have more cybersecurity initiatives and resources that are dedicated. We have to have a better understanding of sort of these, Russian trolls that do stuff on Twitter and social media that are all fake. There was a really good article recently that was written it might have been the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post, I can't remember, that talked about how Russia's been doing things, for instance, targeting American companies where they'll essentially do a social media campaign saying that, for instance, people are getting sick from eating chicken in a certain city, right? So they spreading false rumors about an instance of trying to create panic, right, or make a company look bad, or say there's a salmonella outbreak, and it's all fictitious, right? There's no truth to it at all. That's the exact same thing that they will continue to do in our elections. I've spent time with the FBI in the Brooklyn Center office. They target every single day through cybercrime every one of our companies in Minnesota and the Midwest area. All of our intelligence agencies back that up. So it's happening, and it's going to continue to happen, and we just need to have other resources that are put into place to help it. Okay, Charlie on the line from Eden Prairie. Thanks for waiting, Charlie.
This is Charlie Ostergen. Just wanted to understand where you stand as far as the border wall between Mexico and the U.S. It just seems like, I think our monies could be spent better elsewhere and so forth. I know, security and things like that is important, but, I just wanted to get your input on that.
Yeah. Well, my view is that, to talk of a wall is not the way to, talk about security. Obviously we have to have a secure border, but the reality is if you just focus only on a wall, it's going to be, one, more expensive, and it's going to be less secure. Every section of our border faces really unique geographical and cultural, technological challenges that are going to really be best addressed when you've got a flexible sector-by-sector approach. That's going to better empower your agents on the ground, right, that use different resources. It's going to allow you to focus efforts on rather than just building a wall only, because you're not going to put a wall through Big Bend National Park, for instance. It's really expensive. You're not going to see private landowners giving up their land to have a wall put on the border. That's not a very effective way. There are certainly some areas where that's part of a compromise, to be honest. You can do more border security dollars and then do some things on DACA and some others. That's the part that gets some more on the Democrat side and the Republican side together. That's the compromise that needs to be done just to get some of these immigration policies moving forward. But no, you're not going to have a physical wall moving across everything at every sentence. For instance. So, good question, though. Okay, we got a few more on the line. We got, it might be Maggie from Chaska.
Yeah, I'm Maggie.
Maggie, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a high school senior, and with the recent issues with school shootings and gun violence, and the tension, I believe learning environments have been compromised by fear and just genuinely concerned students. What are you doing to return schools back to safe places of learning? And also I'm curious as to know how you feel about arming teachers and staff members outside of trained school officers.
Yeah, okay. Well, Maggie, it says you're from Chaska, too. You go to Chaska High School?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I went to high school. So, of course, now you got the school's grown, district's grown. So the old high school I went to was is now a middle school. So again, congratulations on being there as a Chaska Hawk. Well, as I said, sort of right at the beginning of the call, a child's education should not be hindered by fear of an attack, and that's why I think these Parkland students, speak with such authority and articulate perspective. In fact, they're up on Capitol Hill today, and no parent should feel that they're putting their child in danger, when they're sending them off to be educated, when they're sending them off to school. And what happened in Florida was a real reminder that there's a lot of work that needs to be done to provide the assurance of safety for students, for parents, for teachers, and administrators is going to be put in place. And again, as I mentioned earlier in our call, that means filling in these gaps where we can all agree there are gaps in the current system that need to be fixed, without a doubt. And fixing some of those gaps is going to give a lot more confidence of safety and security, not only, again, for students, but for everyone who's working in those buildings. Again, my wife is a teacher. In terms of arming teachers, I just don't think that is an answer. I don't think that's a solution. I would say if a teacher really wanted to do that on their own, they could go through that training, they could, get approval through their school or their school board, they could do that. But that should not be the answer from my perspective, I mean, teachers, and my wife's a teacher. I mean, teachers want to be able to teach. If there's a special circumstance where they think someone individually thinks they could be in that position for that type of training, maybe. But that's a decision that I think they would need to make with their local school and school board. For instance, that's not an answer to solving some of the other gaps that exist in the current system right now that do need to be fixed and can be fixed, by the way, just knowing that we've got such some bipartisan support. Boy, we really covered a lot of issues across the board tonight. A lot about guns, obviously, a lot about, we had some tax stuff and food stamps, SNAP benefits. We had some other stuff on immigration. We've been on for an hour, so they're giving me the sign that we have to cut off. Don't hang up if you're on the line, because everyone goes automatically into a queue, into a voicemail. We get back and turn around to every single one of you also within the next day. May have to give us more than 24 hours because people are we have a lot of voicemails to go through, but we jump into those as quick as we can. And I would really encourage all of you to don't hesitate to reach out with your own stories, your own perspectives, whether it's the new tax bill, whether it's some other issue. Sign up for my email newsletter. Send in your questions. We're doing more now. Every week I do a video conversation with questions we take from throughout our community, and we just answer those questions. Sometimes it's Facebook Live, sometimes it's by video. We're going to start doing Twitter Q&As. We're going to just really try to do whatever we can just to continue to stay in contact with different folks in different ways, because I know your time is precious and busy. And thanks for joining tonight. Most importantly, just thanks for the privilege of representing you. Real challenging times. I don't have all the answers to some of these challenging problems that we face, but I do pledge the commitment to continue to listen, to act on the best of my ability to make thoughtful, smart decisions. And in the end, I think that's what most Minnesotans want and respect, is folks that are just, not only work across the aisle, but are more results-oriented, solution-oriented, not just getting on cable TV, to be a mouthpiece for one specific issue or something like that. So don't hesitate to reach out on the website anytime, paulsen.house.gov. As we get ready for spring break, we also have a variety of tour opportunities where I know we've got a lot of people signed up already, but that shouldn't prevent you from thinking about your future plans as we come up on our spring break time, that we'd love to take kids and families on their capital tours and set you up for some other visits here in Washington. So stay in touch, have a great evening, and have a good night.
The Access Live event has ended.
Thank you again for participating in my telephone town hall meeting. I'm sorry I was unable to get to everyone's question, but please feel free to leave my staff a voicemail with any questions, comments, or concerns from the call. This is an emergency. You can contact my district office at 952-405-8510. We'll be sure to get right back in touch with you. Thanks again, and it's an honor serving you in Congress.
If you wish to leave a message, please press 1. Otherwise, you can simply, at the tone, please begin recording your message. When you have finished recording, please hang up.
Hi, my name is Tracy. I listened to your question and answers. My question wasn't answered, and it had to do with health insurance for those pre-retirees you had talked about, because we are really poised to be at risk for losing insurance, in part because we're losing the very things that the ACA provided. So between now and when we retire, if we are unfortunate enough to have a significant health event, and in that case, it might be my husband, and he wouldn't be able to work, and there goes our policy, our health insurance policy, and so on. So we are left without a safety net, and I'm wondering what you're doing to fill in the gaps for those people, because what I hear is that insurance companies are going to try to force people with pre-existing conditions into high-risk pools. And I just would say that I've paid premiums for 40 years, and I've always been insured. And when it comes to needing insurance, I'd like it to be there. I don't want to play the games. I think this is awful that we do this in this country, and other countries value put a value on health care for everybody. But this is the situation we're in, and I'd like to know what you're doing to fill in the gaps. for people like us, because we pay, my husband and I pay $2,000 a month for our health insurance. Thank you. Bye.